Hey, Steve Livingston here from IP Tax Solutions. I want to talk through a case study today about R&D tax credits and a case I worked on for, about 2 years, defending an R&D tax credit claim challenge from HMRC. So HMRC had opened an inquiry into the actual claim, and this is kind of our journey we went through. And I think it's quite insightful and hopefully useful if you are either a company that's claimed R&D tax credits and maybe you are under the cosh right now of some sort of R&D challenge or inquiry. Maybe you're an accountant or an advisor and you've got cases in your own portfolio of inquiries and you're not quite sure where it's going to end up, and maybe there's, again, some assistance here. I'll leave my link to my LinkedIn description in the description below. So if you want to reach out to me, you can find out more about how I might be able to help you with your particular case. In terms of my background, as I say, I trained with the Big Four, and then I was a partner in a mid-tier firm before starting IP Tax Solutions in 2013, and we specialise in innovation tax incentives, so in particular R&D tax credits, patent box, and also the SEIS and EIS tax reliefs. Our clients typically startups right through to large SMEs. So this particular claim, it was a software company. I can't obviously give you too much detail for confidentiality reasons. Its year end was July 2022, the relevant year. It was about its second or third claim that it made in successive years, and the claim went in in about October 2022, and the claim itself was made up of a reduction in corporation tax payable, so they had taxable profits before the R&D claim, brought it down to zero, and then there's a tax credit on the loss that was created by the R&D tax relief. I think it was made up, I think the total claim was about £80,000. £50,000 was the sheltering of the savings of the corporation tax, and then the £30,000 was a tax credit. In about October, November, they received the tax credit of £30,000. So that's all good, and then we thought that was done and dusted because that was generally how claims worked. Ordinarily, if HMRC did have a problem with a claim, and they didn't challenge many before that, I'll come on to that in a moment, they would tend to ask before they paid out the credit. So this was kind of whole thing, and you probably look back, 2022, 2023 was the time when HMRC was being severely grilled about the floodgates opening with R&D tax credit claims, and it seemed that every man and his dog was making a claim, and as advisors we could see a problem was brewing, had been brewing for a number of years, and HMRC had to do something about it. Unfortunately, they went very scattergun, but we are where we are, and let's talk about that in a moment in terms of the actual details of this particular claim. So fast forward to, it was May 2023, the first letter came through from HMRC, a compliance check on that particular R&D claim, and it was the boilerplate letter that was being circulated. Now, why were they picked up? I think, one of the reasons software is such a large area, and software companies in particular are being attacked, I suppose, or challenged by HMRC. One reason, they make up a huge proportion of the total number of claims, and secondly, it's quite difficult, more difficult, I should say, to pinpoint R&D as opposed to, say, a product or a prototype or something where you can actually look at something tangible. I do wonder, there was talk about at the time whether, and I know they were looking at the standard industry classification code, the SIC code, for companies, and for some reason this particular company had consulting, as it had the typical business domestic software, and it also had consulting, and I think consulting was one they were targeting. So I think, unfortunately, that was regrettable. They're not really a consulting company. They should never have had that in their classifications. But at that time, it wasn't something that HMRC were actively pursuing before that. So this was kind of a new development, and with hindsight, you wish you'd have changed it, but we are where we are. Anyway, so challenge comes through, and unfortunately it's from the ISBC unit, and then when you see that, your heart sinks, because this was kind of the department where was certainly at that stage was largely nameless, so letters were signed off by the R&D tax credits compliance team or something like that, rather than actually a named caseworker or certainly not inspector. So first letter comes through, and it's boilerplate, it's a long letter, and as you've probably seen, if you've had an inquiry or you're an advisor, it was kind of a lot of questions which we'd already answered because we had provided a detailed report. This is before the AIS were required, the additional information form, but we had provided, quite a substantial technical report in terms of supporting why it qualified and jumping through all the various hoops in terms of, what was the baseline, what was technological advance, what were the technical uncertainties, and what work was done to overcome the technical uncertainties, etc., etc. So we'd provided all that. So you end up going through and having to rewrite loads of it again. So we sent that in. And then, long story short, we got about 2, 3, 4 letters, I think it was, going back and forth HMRC. And what was really frustrating, and if you've been in this boat, you'll know exactly what I mean, is that the letters we were getting back were just rehashing bits of copying and pasting from the BAI's guidelines, which we're all advised very familiar with. You don't need to copy and paste into the letter, but making up huge chunks of the letter with just copying and pasting sections and saying things like, we think it's routine adaptation, da-da-da-da-da, and really frustratingly not asking any questions. So there was no real attempt to sort of we have concerns about this, explain to us in more detail what was the baseline, what were existing tools, why weren't they adequate for your needs, what was it that was novel about it, all the kind of, you could sort of dig around it, and the questions that you want to ask, a lot of it was there, the answers were already there in the report that we clearly hadn't read. But it was a case of, just ask us a question, for goodness sake, just, give us something to bite on. But it was just like, no, and it's, you get the impression, and again, if you're in this situation, you know what I mean, is that they'd already made their mind up, they'd rejected it, and they were just sort of stringing it out, and maybe giving us like throwing us a bit of rope, saying, just try and see if you can get out of this, but we've already made up our mind. So we're going back and forth. They didn't understand what the company did. And the angle they kept taking was completely wrong. And then we kept trying to sort of push them back into the lane of this is what we actually were doing, the company was doing, and just never seemed to pick up on it, just kept falling back. Also felt like different people picking up the letter, so it felt like a different person each time was picking up, because it just seemed to just rehash old ground. Horribly frustrating, client getting really cross. This went over, and there'd be months between letters, and we would have to respond within 30 days, and we did, and then they would go months and months between letters, and it went on and on. The client went to their MP, tried to get involved because they were just getting so frustrated, nothing to no avail. Then we get a final letter from HMRC saying, we do not think it's R&D at all. So there wasn't even a kind of getting to the cost, it was just a pure blanket refusal. And therefore issuing a closure notice, and you can appeal to the get Sol's review, which is Solicitor's Office legal team, to look at the claim and get an independent review. We may as well do it. There we go. So we send the information to them, all the details for them to review it. And no surprise, as many of R&D advisors will testify, they come back and they side with HMRC. So again, another couple of months waited, they come back and say, no, we don't think it's qualifying R&D, and HMRC are correct, and therefore closure notice, pay back the tax. And this is the frustrating thing, is the company's had the money back, and it's an SME, it's spent the money. £80,000 had been spent, and they're asking for it back and saying, interest is accruing. They start slamming letters on them, demanding the payments, etc. Anyway, that finishes, and they say, well, you can appeal. Your next kind of step is to appeal to a tribunal, and you may get ADR, so some sort of alternative dispute resolution, but you have to get the sort of appeal process going first. And I do remember it was just before Christmas, not the one just gone, the Christmas 2024, and we had a kind of chat, and we had our deadline 30 days to get it in. And I never forget the client saying, the MD saying, and he was a competent professional as well, it was like, I am so confident in this that we do qualify. I'm prepared to die on this hill. Let's just appeal to tribunal. Let's take this all away. And I was convinced as well that there was qualifying work. It was a qualifying project. HMRC didn't understand it, and therefore let's go for it. So we filed the paperwork for the tribunal, got it in on time, and then you get the initial sort of confirmations through, and then it goes silent. And we waited about 8-9 months, and this fast forward now, we're now in about kind of about September-ish. This in the year's gone, September 2025. Bear in mind, this started in May 2023, so we're now in September-ish 2025. and we get the tribunal letters start coming through. You're kind of coming up next. You're getting in the process. So at this point, HMRC have 60 days to get their case together. And now he's thinking, right, what's their appetite here for this? One thing I should have added earlier on is just at the end of when the Souls kind of review was going on, maybe just before that, the Get On Board case came out. And if you're not familiar with the Get On Board case, you need to be for software R&D claims. It was a critical case, and effectively the taxpayer, the company, won. And it was a very supportive case. And actually, many of the facts, it was a very similar area of software this particular company is working in. And it really helped supported the case of the company I was working with. We put those, said that hadn't been acknowledged by Souls. We put that in the tribunal sort of paperwork. And we kind of really hang our hat on that because it was a really, really vital case for us. Anyway, so the paperwork starts coming through, and you start thinking, well, have they got the appetite for this? So they've got 60 days. And then I was thinking, oh, great, looking kind of 60 days. And then I think we got 40 days to get our case together afterwards. And I could see it's like just round about Christmas time. Brilliant, Christmas blown up, but hey, it would have been worth it. And then about a week later, suddenly HMRC spring into action. And at last, we're getting the adults in the room are coming out, and we get an email from someone within the R&D team, HMRC, saying, actually, we think this would be worth having a meeting to discuss, and maybe getting ADR as well before we get to tribunal. I'm thinking, God, we've been asking for a meeting. This is great. Yes, we'll do that, absolutely. And then suddenly, it's like another email's, can you be available the next 2 weeks? And we're like, oh my God, we've been waiting months, May 2023. And so it's like, meeting in the next couple of weeks. Great. So we get a date through. I think it's like 2 p.m. is the call. And they say it's going to be an informal discussion. We're just going to sort of knock it around and see where it goes from there. It may end up going to ADR and then ultimately tribunal, but let's have this initial meeting. Great, that's fine. And the client just said, I just want to be heard. I just want to sit down with someone and explain it. So here's our opportunity. And then fast forward to that day, and they notified to say that we're going to look through the paperwork in the morning, and then we'll have the call in the afternoon. We're not going to be kind of super au fait with everything because we're just going to have the morning, but just a kind of a high level discussion. That's fine. That's no problems. And I actually get a call in the morning about 11 o'clock from the relevant inspector. And to be fair, great guy, very straightforward in his approach, very just commonsensical, really. It was just someone with common sense, great. And he's basically said, I think you've been poorly treated. The company's been poorly treated. It's quite embarrassing, the times, it's embarrassing some of the kind of, the lack of diligence and work that's been done on the particular claim by during the review process. Here are my concerns, though, and he did have concerns. These are sort of areas I'm going to focus on. That's fine. That's great. He's asking valid questions. That's absolutely fine. Anyway, we get on the call, and it's the one inspector and his kind of someone taking notes with him, and it was the competent professionals in the company and myself on the call, and it was conducted in a really open discussion. It was, as I say, the guy was very straightforward. The inspector. He allowed the company to talk. He listened. He apologised for their treatment, and then kind of came to the end and said, do you know what? I'm broadly happy that it's R&D. And then we had a bit of a kind of discussion around costs and allocations, etc. And then he said, basically, come back to me with your further thoughts on the costs. And I was thinking, right, it's going to be like a week or 2 weeks. And he said, just go away, come back to me in a couple of hours. We'll hop back on the call again. So literally went away, spoke with it. I can't give too many details, but we fractionally, on a without prejudice basis, just to get the thing finished, moved the figures very slightly. And he said, I'll recommend it to HMRC, to the R&D team, and let's see where it goes. Long story short, about a week later, 2 weeks later, we get a letter saying, agreed, closed, tribunal finished, and success, hats in the air. So the company had to pay back a tiny bit, nothing like the 80,000 they were going to have to pay. And I think that's sort of message from this is don't lose heart with it. If you've got a valid claim and you're confident in the claim, and you've had hopefully professional advice, you've got a second opinion on it. There's been a case that's recently gone through M&C Education or something where I think they were self-represented, and you could read it and say that wasn't R&D. You can kind of see where they were confused, why they thought they were R&D, but any R&D advisor with their salt will tell you that wasn't qualifying. So you've done R&D, you've got some sort of external verification you're doing R&D. Don't be bullied. Stand up for your ground. And I think this was a case in point that just showed it works. Being persistent, and we had to push it to tribunal level to get there in the end. It didn't get to tribunal, but it opened the door for adults to walk into the room and try and thrash it out and sort it out, and that's where we ultimately got to. And client was thrilled. I'm pleased that we got a successful resolution. It should never really happen in the first place, to be honest with you. They were caught up in the crossfire like lots of companies like yourselves probably, if you're still watching this at this point and you resonate with this. But I've still, and since this, I've worked on various companies where I've just, they've referred their cases to me to look at if they're under inquiry, just to get a second opinion. I looked at one fairly recently, and to be honest with you, HMRC had kind of offered their opinion, and I think it was the right opinion. Certain projects weren't qualifying, so get a second opinion if you want. And say my LinkedIn details are below. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. But I hope it's a kind of a hopeful story for you if you're a company and you've been either hauled over the coals by HMRC and feel like there's no way out. There is a way out, and just be persistent. And if you're too scared to make a claim, don't necessarily, the tax relief is there for you if it's genuine R&D what you've been doing. So again, don't be put off. And I hope that's useful. That's kind of a story of a defence of an R&D claim that could have been a tribunal claim, but that actually wasn't. And I've heard, anecdotally, there are plenty of other examples like this where HMRC are stepping in at the end and just getting it dealt with. And this isn't, again, I should say, it's not a kind of a get out of jail free for kind of have a go heroes in terms of, if your claim is flimsy, don't go to this level. The guy we spoke to he was switched on. He knew what he was doing. And if we had something that was remotely kind of, as I say, couldn't stand up to scrutiny, he would have knocked it down and said, right, we'll take you all the way. We'll make a mockery of you. So you don't want to go down that route. Hope that's useful. My name's Steve Livingston, and thanks for watching.